We're back with you. It's nationwide this morning, and we are changing gears again. We're looking at the steps to home ownership. Are you thinking of owning a home? Now, there are a couple steps that you probably need to take. You need to assess your budget, you need to get pre approved for a mortgage, and next, you need to find a trusted real estate agent and search for the right properties. On All Things Real Estate today, we'll discuss the steps to home ownership with managing attorney at Law Boss Attorneys and Law Boss Attorneys at Law, in particular, Sophia Bryan. Welcome, Sophia. Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
It's nice having you here. Let's begin with a short recap of last week's segment and what happens to property when somebody dies without a will.
Awesome. So last week we spoke about the connection between real estate and estate planning. And what I want to share is that if you don't have a will in place, there is something in place per what the laws of Jamaica says. So there's already a protocol if somebody passes away without a will. The law says a certain family member has first preference, and then there's an order of priority. And so it means that there's going to be delays in determining who the relevant beneficiaries of an individual's estates are, who those persons are. And it's a lengthy process.
Yeah.
And this can cause some of that problem and drama and conflict that we spoke about last week that happens when persons don't put proper plans in place.
Yeah. So we want to change gears this week to look at just the steps to home ownership. And the first thing, you're an attorney at law, the first thing our listeners would want to know is what are the legal steps that you need to take when, looking at purchasing your first home or looking at purchasing a home?
Right, so there are quite a few steps in the process. It's not so straightforward in our jurisdiction. And the very first important step is to do your background check and due diligence. This is after you've gotten your pre-approval from the bank or the relevant financial institution. You need to get the services of an attorney at law to do the background checks to ensure that the person who says that they're the owner, their name is on the registered title. You make sure that the boundaries for the property are in place, and you make sure that the offer that you've made in terms of price matches up with what the value of the property is, because at the end of the day you can buy anything for whatever amount of money that you want, but when that agreement for sale goes to tax office and they send their evaluators, there may be a conflict there. So it's important to also go through that process.
So what are some of the legal issues that can derail a real estate deal if you were to, start going through with the deal and then boom, some legal issue pop up? What are the common ones that you've seen?
So if somebody is representing an owner by way of power of attorney or purporting to represent the owner by way of power of attorney, this document needs to be valid. And I've seen instances where a power of attorney may not meet the specific requirements. It may not have been stamped, and so the transaction can't move forward. Another thing that happens is persons need to remember that yes, you've gone through a pre-approval process, but there's also that process that you go through again once the agreement is signed. You are going through another approval process with your financial institution to make sure that, okay, your credit is still intact. The monies that you have to pay to process the loan, you've paid those things. And so that can take a lot longer than anticipated sometimes. And so it's important to have open communication about the process, so that in the event that there is something where you have to pay interest, if there's delays with handing over funds, then you may not be penalized for that.
Yeah, so when it comes on to insurance, what insurance should home buyers look at when considering to buy their home? What do you suggest they should look at?
All right, so as you know, real estate is something that facilitates building of generational wealth. And if something were to happen to you the bank to reclaim that asset. You'd want the bank to find the money somewhere else.
Yeah.
And that's how insurance comes into play. So there are two options that are available. You can get get a creditor life policy, it means that this insurance covers the value of the property or the transaction, and it's for a set amount of years, i.e., that is the amount of years that you have to repay the mortgage. However, if you want something that is a little bit more long lasting and will be around even after you've cleared off your mortgage, then you can get a whole life policy. And typically, this is the better option because you also have an opportunity to earn money through equities or whatever instruments the insurance company puts your money in. You have an opportunity to earn that way as well.
Okay, that's interesting. So, also people have gone on TikTok and seen advertisements about homes to buy, homes to rent, etc. Oh, the question some of my listeners will have is, why is it important to use a licensed realtor and an actual attorney in these transactions?
All right, so we have the mechanisms and the tools at our fingertips to actually do all the necessary due diligence checks. So for my firm, Law Boss, a lot of our clients are actually Jamaicans who are overseas, and so sometimes they're not in a position to go to the necessary agencies on their behalf, and so that's where we come in. We can verify whether or not the title is real. We can verify whether or not the boundaries have been breached or not. We have people at our fingertips in terms of verifying the value of the property, and so we have to go through so much due diligence to make sure we maintain our licenses, and so you're in a much better position to ensure that your transaction goes smoothly and that you're not defrauded of your funds.
So, do you think we should own properties individually or jointly? Do you see problems there? Is it easier for me to singularly say, hey, I'm going to go for my NHD benefits and buy a property, versus saying, hey, I want to do this with my sister, my brother, my mom? Do you see the potential challenges in joint ownership, or is that something that can easily be averted when you have the right people involved?
Well, the reality is, home ownership, it's a very expensive venture, an expensive undertaking. And so some people are fortunate enough to find people that they trust and that have the means to actually go on the journey with them. However, it's important to bear in mind what the arrangement is going forward. So we have something called joint tenancy versus tenancy in common. So joint tenancy means that under the law, you own the property jointly. There's no split. If one person passes away, it automatically goes to the other person. So that's what's called rights of survivorship. However, if you decide that, look, we're coming into this transaction, whether it's 50-50, 60-40, 20-80, whatever the case may be, it could even be more than two persons. You say, you know what, if anything, I want my share to be clearly identified, and so you can go into the transaction as tenants in common, and that would be reflected on the title. So it's important to really think about that. I find that sometimes, especially in like marriages, for example, sometimes people go their separate ways, and that forms some sort of complication. And so you kind of have to spend a lot of money to reverse that decision if it wasn't thought out properly. So one is not better than the other per se. You just have to be open and direct and make sure you get the proper advice. And I wouldn't discourage anybody from purchasing jointly once a proper contract is in place.
Okay. Do you have anything else to share with our listeners before we go? I'm getting the signal. So before we go, do you have anything else to share with our listeners and how they can contact you?
Right. So we are easily accessible. www.thelawbossfirm.com. That's our website. And you can reach out to my office by calling or WhatsApping 876-990-7313. That's 876-990-7313.
All right. Thank you so much. That is indeed our talk about real estate and the steps to home ownership with Sophia Bryan, attorney at law. She is the managing attorney at Law Boss Attorneys at Law.